Okay, in this tutorial we're going to make a milk cap mushroom. Particularly we're going to make the oak bug one, which is sort of commonly found in sort of woodland area near oak trees in the UK. Now we're going to utilise some of the textures that we created inside of Nile that I've really done some prep inside of Photoshop 4 to help us with this. Now what we're going to do as part of this process is going to sculpt the mushroom so that we can have some high resolution detail, such as strokes and the shaping that we want, and some of the spores that we have underneath that alignment as well. We're then going to manual topologize it, and we're also going to project the detail onto a low resolution version of it, so that we'll have the high resolution used for the textures, and also then we'll have the low resolution that we're going to use for a game ready object. So a few things that we're going to do. We're going to start off by creating a new document inside of Zbrush so that we have a larger screen to work on. We're going to start by selecting a cylinder 3D, and I'm going to click and drag that out holding shift, and I'll press edit, and then I'm going to make sure that perspective is on, and I'm going to scale the object. So I'm going to scale it in this direction first. I'm going to use sort of our eyes really to do this in terms of observation, and then I'm going to shrink it down. The reason I'm shrinking it down is so that when we get round to sort of using the brushes and sculpting, we won't have to scale up the size of any of the brushes, etc. So I'm just holding shift to move this up to about 1.4 when I'm scaling. Once I've done this, I'm going to need to turn it into Polymesh 3D so that we can sculpt onto it. So we're going to do that first. I want you to make sure that you rename that. So this one is going to be the mushroom underscore stem. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the subtool menu, press append, and we're going to append ourselves a sphere. Now this sphere should already be Polymesh 3D sphere. If it isn't, when we get in here we're going to have to convert to a Polymesh as well. This will take it away out of the same subtool menus as the others, and you'll have to reappend that in. So just be wary of that. So with this sphere selected, what we're going to do is we're going to move it up, and we're also going to scale it, and also we're going to want to make that a little bit larger, just so that we have it sort of relatively close to the size that we have within these reference images. So you can see they're a little bit larger than what we have on the outside. Some of them range in sizes, so you kind of have a little bit of leeway to go with this. Now what I'm going to want to do is to make sure that this one's renamed as well, and we're going to call this one the mushroom underscore cap. I believe that's what they're called for the top of it. Now we've got a few things that we're going to have to do, but first we've got to sculpt the actual shape. So I'm going to speed this process up so that you can see me doing that at a much faster pace. Now just before I get to go into doing that, what I would consider while sculpting on this object is whether we want to have local symmetry on. If you do, press X, and also in the transform tools you'll have the ability to use other axis points to do that with if you're wanting to add to this shape quite quickly. So if I just start to begin to show you this, what you will see is that if we click on to draw, I'm just going to make my brush a little bit bigger. As you can see, I didn't want to try and have this object too large because the draw size becomes quite large and difficult to keep a hold of. So if we press X on our keyboard, you'll see that whatever I do on this side is going to happen on the other. But if we want to speed that process up, what we can do is go to transform and tell it that we also want to do it onto the Z-axis as well, and you'll see that it happens on all four sides. Now I strongly suggest at this point that for the cap that you work with Dynamesh turned on as well. Now this will allow you to sort of rejig the polys in here, and it will then give you a chance to be able to get a bit more detail out of it. So we can start with adding some of the shape into this area to make sure that we're working on a brush that we want to use. So I'm going to use my clay build-up as usual, and you can see then that I can then build up what I want in all 4 axis points, and it keeps it kind of nice. What I would suggest is working with a large brush as much as possible in the beginning, then we can build up the shape of the overall mushroom, and it's a lot quicker if we do it this way than what it would be if you were to do it without the localized symmetry on. So I'm going to speed this process up now, and then we'll come back to it when we have the shape how we want it. Okay, when you've done the start of the cap, what we're going to do then is merge the 2 together. So we're going to have the need to move the cap above the stem in the subtool by doing that little click there, and we're then going to merge it down and press OK, and that's then going to make the 2 one solid object. We're then going to be able to do a Dynamesh and continue to sculpt onto the next bit. I'll just speed that up. Okay, at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the object. So if everybody could do that as well, that'd be great. Okay, once we get to this point, we're going to want to put some extra detail onto the object. Now, we've sculpted some of the symmetrical aspects of it. We're also going to want to add some asymmetric detail to this object so it doesn't look as if it's the same all the way around. So I'm just going to speed up that process again, start adding some of those further details just to make this object seem a little bit more unique. Okay, so at this stage, what we're going to want to do is we're going to put some of the texture detail onto this object. So what we're going to need to do first of all is mask out some of the areas so that we can't drag out any of the detail from the picture that we're going to use. So if you hold Control, what we can do is we can start to mask the area of the object that we don't want to select. So we can just change the size of our drawer, keep holding Control and going around your object to the area that we don't want to have selected. Now this is going to be the majority of the stem, and we're going to see how and which this applies. We want to make sure that we mask off this section here. If we do a little bit more than we need to, you want to hold Alt as well as the control function, and that will allow you to remove any areas that you don't want. But we can try and get as much around this surface area as possible. And we're also going to want to select the top just in case that it comes through. However, in order to get this to have a bit of a fall off, we are going to press Control with the mask and click on the area, and you see there that it gives ourselves a fall off point for the masking selection, which is going to help us when it comes around to adding the detail. Now instead of using the pen to select everything here, we're going to hold Control and drag select outside of that area so that we can get the entire part of the top here, but nothing underneath. Now with that selected, we're going to add in ourselves our picture. So we're going to go to Alpha, and we're going to go to Import, and we're going to select from our images this one here, the underneath close-up, and press Open. With that on, we're going to make sure that Drag Rect is selected, and we're going to then draw out of here the detail. However, we currently have 21 Z intensity, which is quite high, so we're probably going to want to drop that down a little bit, probably somewhere between 10 and 15 for the best result. If we drag that out again, we're going to want to get that to the point where it goes to the edges, and that will give us a nice bit of detail for our normal map. Once we're happy with that, press Control and drag select outside the area, and it will unmask what we've done. And then we're going to go and File, Save As. So to make the manual topology for this, what we're going to do is we're going to append ourselves a Z-sphere. So we're going to go into the subtools, and then what we're going to do is press Append, find Z-sphere, and what we want to do with this is we want to shrink it so that it's inside of the object and it can't be seen. The reason that we're doing that is so that then we can create the topology around the object. Make sure you've got Z-sphere selected. I'm going to scale it down until it goes inside of the object. From there then, in order to be able to see it, we can just press transparent, and we'll see that the object there turns into something that's a little bit more transparent on it, but it still gives the appearance of the object. We're just going to move that into a position where we're happy with it. Really, as long as they're inside and it's going to be away from where we want to draw the topology, we're going to be okay, but I'm going to keep it at the bottom here, just so that there we have something that's a little bit easier to recognize where it is in terms of location. Now, if we drop down to the side here, what we're going to do first of all is just rename this mushroom underscore low, so that then we're going to know that this version will be the low poly version of this overall object. We're then going to scroll down to the menu where it's called Topology on the right hand side, and we're going to press Edit Topology, and what this is going to allow us to do in draw mode is we're going to be able to click onto the object, you can see there, and we can pick where we're going to have topology being made on this object. So if we click all those four together, we'll see now, if we turn draw off, that we can maneuver these, and they're based on where we are within the scene. So we can maneuver just the one of them. So we're going to place that into the center as much as possible. But what I'm going to want to do is to think about how I'm going to lay out the topology. Now we've got a circle that's going to happen in the middle here, but we're going to want to go out in as least amount of polys as possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with just having a square. When we've got draw on, we can then click to other locations to be able to build more polys. As you can see here then, we can maneuver them collectively or individually so that then they fit onto the object like we have here. When we have draw on, what we want to do is click onto the one that we want to draw from, click, click, and then click back to the one that we have there. Now, as we've got two parts at the bottom, we want to remain as low poly as we possibly can. So what we're going to do from here is go up another, and here we're going to join these two. So that if we press A on our keyboard, we'll see that it tries to make the geometry as it does when we've used them before. Now I'm purposely trying to keep this relatively low poly, but at the moment this isn't going to do a good enough job of what we need. So what we can do is hold Alt to get rid of these where we want them, to undo any of that if we have it. Now when we want to draw this topology, what I'm going to consider is how many sides I want this to have. So to start us off, I'm going to click, 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 and click. Now what I'm going to do is turn this whole object into something that's relatively 8-sided. So when I click onto here, I'm going to go down to another one, I want here, I want here. Now what it will do is it will create from where we last selected. So if you don't get where you want it, click back on the area and then you will be able to draw from that location again. As you can see, wherever it is red and highlighted is where it will draw from. From there, if we want to select another to start to draw from, we use the move tool, we can select that one. And what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to use each of these sides that we have on the bottom that we've selected. So we've got one here, another one in the middle, another one on the outside. We get enough to make this circular. So what we're going to do is to draw up this shape based off of that topology. So I'm just going to speed this up now so you can see. Now if we get here an issue, and what we're going to want to do is to see whether we have any missing points. Now if we select here, we'll be able to draw back onto there. We want to make sure that we don't have any overlapping topology, as we can see there. We want to make sure that it is continuously flowing up from singular place, and so that we're not creating extra ones like we've seen there. We want to make sure that if we want to select from a certain point, we select it in the move tool and use the draw tool to be able to select where you draw next. And if we change location, like I said, select the one that we want to draw from and move around that. What we do have to be careful is that we're not doubling up these points. If we do double them up, you're going to need to hold Alt and remove them afterwards. So I'm purposely going to try and keep this as relatively low poly as I can, but we still need to try and keep the rest of the form in. So please bear that in mind when we're doing this. Just going to speed up now the topology for the rest of the stem. Now if you find this difficult to see, what you can do is change the material that's on the object. So if you turn it into something that's a little bit darker, then you can see it. Not so easy actually. Let's change that to something lighter, then we can see the actual contrast and where the polys are going to be then. And then we can continue drawing. Now when it comes to topology, yes, manual topology is slower, but we're always going to get a bespoke version of what we're after if we do it ourselves, which means that the topology is going to be better suited to the overall purpose of what we're trying to create. We're not relying on the software guessing on what we want, instead we're generating it ourselves. Now when we get to the edges, what we're going to do is to go out in the same fashion as what we did with this. We want to gradually go further out so that we keep this topology flowing the same as what we had. So from here we're going to gradually get a little bit larger. We want to keep that this way as much as possible. The polys are going to get a little bit bigger than what we had previously, so what we want to try and do is even them out as much as we can. Just using the move tool. Once we get to the center, we're then going to finish this off the same way as what we did underneath. So we go to the middle and create ourselves that quad. And then the last thing that we need to do is to just see about moving some of this out to get as much of the shape as we can into this manual topology. We're purposely keeping it pretty low for the entirety of this project, so that we can then some more of the detail out. Let's have a low resolution. Right, what I'm going to do now is press A on my keyboard just to see what the object's like. As you can see, if we just move that off, we've got some nice topology from a relatively simple shape. Just press Ctrl Z to get it back into there. Press A again to be able to edit it, but A is what's going to turn it into our finished piece of geometry. So once we've got this to a point of where we've finished it, we're going to go File and Save As again. And this time we want to call it Final Topology, so we know the difference between the saves. We're going to make sure that the object is without any issues. So what I want you to do at this stage is to go around and just maneuver some little bits just to make sure there's no openings in it, and that is looking pretty good. Okay, once you've saved it and you completed the topology, what we're going to want to do in topology is to drop that topo smooth down and the pre-subdiv down. We're also going to want to go to adaptive skin and tell it that we want to lower the density down to 1 and the Dynamesh resolution down to 0. So when we press A on our keyboard, then it will turn that adaptive skin preview on. We will then be able to see if there's any issues with our mesh. Now we've currently got 1 or 2 here. All we have to do with that is, if anybody gets anything like this, is we need to make sure that we turn both of them on, and we can go back in and edit the topology. So we turn A off, and we'll see that we've got an area that is missed out, so we're going to have to draw that in. So what we're going to do, let's draw, go from here, see what's currently going on, if there's anything. If there's nothing, we want to be able to see it, so let's turn transparency on. You can see there that we've got something going on inside of it, so we're going to want to edit that. Down here, let's turn draw on. I'm going to get rid of that by pressing Alt. I'm just going to make sure that we've not got anything else going on. Turn transparency off. Let's move this into position and draw that topology back. And just test it. And press A again. And just get rid of that. There we go. And underneath now, we need to add some in there as well. So turn it back on. Press A again on the keyboard. And we're just making sure that we're going to have to draw in this one. This one here. Making sure that we've not missed any. Now the reason why we might get some of that here is because we've got an extra piece. So just going to press Alt onto this one, because we don't want that one. Press A again and be able to see what's going on. And there we go. It was just that was making that not work too well. So we turn that back on. Have the mushroom low selected. Go to adaptive skin. We want to make sure that everything is density lowest and Dynamesh lowest. I'm going to make adaptive skin. As soon as we make it an adaptive skin, we will see now that it's turned into its own subtool, which then gives us the game ready model. What we're going to do now is need to export this to unwrap it, so that we have the unwrapped finished model to be able to do the projection onto it. Now, we do that by selecting the highest mushroom, so our mushroom cap, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to export. I'm going to call that mushroom high. Press yes. And with this one, we're going to select it, and we go export, and we're going to call that mushroom low, and save. Now we have the two. Now when it comes down to unwrapping, you've got a couple of options, but I would suggest taking it into 3ds Max to do that to the low. However, what you can do inside of Zbrush is do some form of unwrapping. So if we get rid of the high unwrap and go to Z plugin and go to UV master, press work on clone, and so it will give us our low resolution version. I'll just turn line fill on and sort of show you. Go to Z plugin and you're going to press unwrap, and that will do a quick job for us. If we click on check seams, we'll see where those are, that it created the seams. But if we press flatten above it, we'll see what happened to the object. Now, it's not very good. So if we unflatten it, turn off line fill, and we then can see check seams again, where the seams are that our unwrappers has done. Now, we can actually change them, and if we press enable control painting, what we can do is erase the original ones and attract where we want the seams to and protect certain areas. So if we protect areas of the shape that we don't want there to be seams on, like for example on top of the shape, we wouldn't want to see any around the outside here, and on the top of the shape here. Additionally, we probably don't want to see them on here if we could help it. And we're just painting that on using the mouse. Additionally, I wouldn't want to see them anywhere along here too much. But the reality of it is that they're going to have to be somewhere, and I'd want to protect this front face as well. So let's give that a try. Press unwrap, and see then it's moved the seams to a little bit around the edges. Still not quite the level of control that we can get with 3ds Max, but if we go to flatten again, you see that it's done a lot better of a job than it did the first time, just through doing the protect areas for that. Now, you will have to look at altering the size of this for the environment that we're working on, but that's suitable enough. But I would say spend some more time on it inside of 3ds Max instead. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.